What's up, guys? It's Rowan here from Artist Smart TV. Now, one of the biggest challenges I think that really so many students have is staying motivated throughout years 11 and 12. And I think, for students that had to navigate COVID lockdowns, that challenge was even larger. Now, what's really interesting about that though is that through that journey, students had to develop, even more clear strategies and approaches to stay motivated. And that's really, I think, great legacy for students that are continuing to maybe you watching this right now, sitting years 11 and 12, because we can really look to see what students did when motivation was absolutely slammed. And we can use that as strategies that you can use in your life now to get motivated for years 11 and 12. And so today, I'm sitting down chatting with Derek, who shared with me earlier that motivation was one of his biggest challenges. And so we're going to find out what Derek did to maintain his motivation, manage it so he could successfully get into exercise and sports science at UTS, which was his goal degree for university. So welcome, Derek.
Hey, Rowan.
Now, just, motivation, let's unpack it quickly, right? Scale of 0 to 10, 10 being peak motivation, right? Like the maximum you could possibly have, 0 meaning like you got nothing, you don't want to get out of bed, right? What was the lowest your motivation levels got down to in the year 11 and 12 journey?
Oh, probably 2. 1 to a 2 was definitely the lowest. Yeah.
Wow. So you were pretty much on the floor, right? Yeah. Not a whole lot more that you could go. Yeah. Now, obviously that's pretty challenging, and I know that part of that I'm imagining happened or was exacerbated by COVID lockdown. Is that correct?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that, right? Like what happened to your motivation to get it so low, and then how did that lack of motivation impact you?
Well, I feel like if I could describe my motivation throughout my first year, year 11, it was that I started to get overwhelmed, which is really pretty much what dragged me down in terms of motivation. Like think of the game, Whack-A-Mole, the game. Think about it like all these moles are popping up, which are different subjects. And, you whack one and another one pops up. And then all these moles start popping up and you're just trying to get all of them, but you just can't. That's how I sort of felt in year 11, especially with COVID. One thing popped up and I managed to, using all my strength to get that one thing down. But then a ton of other things would pop up as well. And so from that point, I'm like, why am I doing it when, all these things are happening and this is getting out of control? And so that's when I really felt low. I can't do anything. I can't control everything at once, which is what really brought me down.
And then as your motivation hit, I'm assuming the work that you were doing stopped, like you weren't working consistently, you're falling behind. Like what were some of the impacts of that motivation drop for you?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I definitely stopped working as much as I would have. There were days where I didn't even work at all. I'd just say, I'll just do it tomorrow. I remember telling myself that a lot. I remember there were times where I said, I'd study, a subject for 1 hour. But as a matter of fact, I studied for like 25 minutes, and then after that time, I'd be like, oh no, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. So yeah, it definitely took a massive impact on my studying. I definitely studied for less, and I definitely didn't push myself as much as I could have.
And it creates a bit of a nasty cycle, doesn't it? Because you were feeling overwhelmed, the whack-a-mole, so you do less, but the work just keeps on growing. Yeah. So the overwhelm, in some respects, just grows more, and then you feel even less like doing it, and so it can become a bit of a cycle that you can get trapped in. So, clearly you didn't stay at 2 out of 10 the entire journey. You were able to turn that around. How did you, rebuild your motivation? Because where did it get to? By the time you got to HSC, right, where was your motivation levels up to?
Oh, by the time I had my HSC, I think I was a confident 8 to 9 because, I've done all the hard work already and I'm in like the home stretch pretty much because I'm just doing the HSC and after that I'm done. And I feel like seeing the finish line was probably the biggest part of that motivation at that point because, I know that all the hard work will be finally paid off.
So big turnaround, from like a 1 to 2 to an 8 to 9, like pretty significant. Let's unpack how you did that. Right, because I think there's probably a lot of students watching that are feeling maybe they're not a 1 or 2, maybe they're a 3 or 4 or even a 5, but they'd love to be at an 8 or a 9. What were some of the first steps you took to try to rediscover that motivation?
Well, I feel like similar to maths, which is a subject I struggled with, I just took a step back first of all. And as much as I would want to freeze time and just stop to take a moment to think about it, I just said, let's just take a moment to breathe and just see what am I doing and how can I improve upon it. So, I remember sitting down and I managed to get a piece of paper and just write down all the things I had to do. And at the start, there was a lot of things to do. But I remember knocking them down one by one. I remember having to learn how to prioritize things. That could be like something that wasn't really a priority to me and then something that really was. And I tried doing the one that was least important first. But, I learned to cross out the ones that, I could wait on and stuff that didn't really impact me that much, and started knuckling down on the things that were really important, because those were the ones that stressed me out the most. So after getting those done, my, to-do list seemed much smaller now. I started to, breathe a bit more. And from there on, as soon as I managed to tackle all that stuff, it just became a habit of writing down all the stuff you have to do and then ticking them off one by one.
Amazing. So first thing here is the reflection, because you were feeling overwhelmed and that was the thing that was causing your motivation. The reflection, what it showed you was like, okay, actually the answer is not to try to do everything, because I'm not going to be able to. Like, that's why I'm failing the whack-a-mole game and I'm losing, right? What actually the answer is to go, well, what are the important things I should be doing? Let's focus on those first. Now, you talked about prioritization. Walk me through a little bit, like, how did you prioritize, right? Because I find that that's something that, again, I think students can struggle with, knowing what they should prioritize, because sometimes everything looks important.
Well, first of all, whenever I was given a task to do, like if it was like an assessment or just some homework to do, I'd have to ask myself, what are the consequences of not completing this task as soon as possible? And so for an assessment, it'd be, getting a 0 or failing or really getting a bad grade because I had to cram it all. Or for homework, it'd probably be like, teachers would be like, oh, just do it. Or you have to stay in for lunch or something like that. Or even some teachers wouldn't even look at the homework. Like, there were times where I'd stress about doing the homework and teachers wouldn't forget about it completely. So it was all about just locating your tasks one by one and thinking, how will this affect me if I don't complete it? And if there was something that is like, oh, it'd be really drastic for me if I didn't complete it, it goes to the very top of the list,
And so was this a daily task of writing this to-do list? So like every day you'd be like, cool, what's got to be done? And then you'd go through that exercise of prioritization?
Oh, yes, definitely. I felt day by day it had to be something like at the very start of my study session, I'd write down all the things I need to do. Because I feel like if you try doing stuff just on a weekly basis, you're gonna miss out. There's gonna be a lot of holes there. So I feel like doing it day by day, you make sure you miss out on nothing.
Amazing. So you've got daily habit. First thing you do at the start of the study session, write down all the things that you might need to do, should do, could do. And then you go, great, what's the consequences if I don't do this? Okay, that's got high consequences to the top, low consequences to the bottom, and then okay, great, I work on sort of the high consequence stuff. Where were you writing the to-do list? Was it like in a notebook, a diary, digitally? Where were you doing it?
Well, when I first started, I just got a piece of paper because I feel like it would keep it as simple as possible, because I know I'd had to, go on like Google Calendar and do something like that to make it really complex. But as I started to get into that daily habit and realized that this is actually a really important thing that I need to do, I actually invested in a small whiteboard. It was like a mini whiteboard. It had like a stand and everything, and I just had it on my desk. And at the start of every study session, I'd get a marker and just write it down. And it's great because you could rub things out too. Like for the stuff that wasn't really a priority, I could rub that out. And if I realized something at the very end that was really important, I could rub that out and write it at the very top. So I feel like, and just the feeling of rubbing out something you've completed is probably one of the most satisfying things you could ever do. And that really helped motivation as well.
Amazing. So we've got daily to-do lists, key habit, we've got prioritization. What else did you do to really rebuild that motivation?
Well, I feel like something that's really undermined, but it's really important, is being able to commend yourself personally and just embrace the small victories. Like if I were to do like a math question and it was a really difficult question, but in the end I managed to do it, I would really commend myself on doing it, maybe even reward myself for a bit, for like a 5-minute break or something like that. Unlike other people who, the only way they seek, gratification is if they get like 100% on an exam, and like those really big things. But I feel like people ignore the small victories, like the getting maths, like one math question right. And I feel like that really boosted my morale because it showed me that I can do this. Unlike with like an exam that only happens probably once a term, you really have to wait once a term to feel that boost in motivation, or you can just do something now and get even a tiny boost of motivation, which can act like as a catalyst for you.
So amazing. So it's the power of the small victories and the small celebrations is that it's like these little charge ups along the way, right, to help you going. It sounds like, though, that's a matter of perception or perspective. And what I mean by that is that, they're probably happening, and it's whether or not you're choosing to see them or not, right? Yeah. So how did you improve your ability to see the little wins, right, along the way, or at least pause and recognize them, right? As opposed to maybe before that ignoring them and just trying to put all that pressure on the assessments themselves?
Well, to be brutally honest, when I first started, I really never commended myself on doing anything. I actually had to get the people around me to commend me on things. Like my parents would, my teachers would, my friends would. They'd really say, hey, good job, Derek, you've done this. And from there, I realized, because I always used to tell myself, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough for doing this. But once I started hearing people say like all these things, like, hey Derek, good job, you've done this well, I started thinking to myself, I'm actually doing these things pretty well. So I started just implementing myself, even though I'd tell myself, hey, you suck at this. I was like, wait, my parents, my teachers, my friends all think I'm good at this, and that's like 3-1. So surely I am doing well and I'm improving.
So it's really changing that inner voice, right? What you're telling yourself, right? And the way that you got to that was first external. So it needed to change, or you needed to hear it externally a little bit first, and then that changed internally. Like, okay, yeah, like I've got this. Instead of it being like, like a discouraging voice, it became a positive, encouraging one of like, no, you can do it. Like if they think so, surely, you could do it, have another crack at it. Is that sort of what happens?
Yeah, you really gotta have a realistic mindset to it. Like if people are saying you're doing good, you're doing good. Like surely you are. Like there's no way people, like there's some people that say do it just for the sake of saying you're doing good. But if multiple people are saying it, surely you are doing good. You gotta realize that, not everything you think is for yourself is the true image of yourself. Sometimes you really gotta learn to accept what people around you have to say and really take that on board with you.
That's amazing. Any other advice or feedback that you would share for students that are struggling with motivation throughout years 11 and 12 that you found worked and was really helpful for you to boost yours?
Well, I feel like during my year 12 journey, I feel like a quote that stuck with me through the whole of the journey was, trust the process. You just got to be able to trust every single thing you do the whole time, And it's not like Rome wasn't built in a day. You can't just expect to do well like from the moment you wake up. You really got to build upon it. And even if there are days where you don't feel like doing well, or like, something really hits you that day, you just got to remember, just trust it, hold on to whatever motivation you have, and remember that the next day is going to be completely different. Like the next day is always going to be a new day. It's like a reset for you. Next day you can try again. And so you're just remembering to trust the process. Like, like at the start of year 12, it might seem really daunting that you have a whole year ahead of you to study, but just remember that, you got to really just remind yourself that you're going to work hard for it. Yeah.
And final question, if you could go back in a time machine to the start of year 11, before the journey's begun, knowing now what you know, what would you do differently?
Oh, I'd probably just tell myself to just remember to stay on top of things. Like the ability to every day start and write down all the things I have to do that day. I felt that really helped me a lot because I was able to see what I had to do and was able to stay on top of everything. Because I remember the start of year 11, like at the start, the very first few weeks, it was really chill for me. But then as the weeks progressed, everything started to come into focus and it was just completely stressful. So if I go into that time machine, the first thing I'd say to myself is, bro, get on top of things early. You got to do it now. No stress, but just get a head start and make sure you have everything under control.
Cool. Brilliant. Any final things you want to share with students that you haven't yet shared?
I'll just remember that, the HSC, it's 1 year. And then as soon as you walk out of the exam, like I know for me, it was a bit postponed a bit, but the moment I walked out of my final exam, I just fell to my knees and just the breath of fresh air it's probably one of the most rewarding things you can ever feel in life. And just keep that in the back of your head, that as soon as you finish that final exam, the feeling you'll get is like nothing you've ever felt before. And it's going to be one of the greatest feelings that you may hold on to for the rest of your life, because I still hold on to that feeling every day.